Point of personal privilege.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, this past weekend we lost two Supreme Court justices, one due to a very tragic and unexpected death, that of Justice Antonin Scalia. Of course, we have no control over those kinds of things happening. We do have control over the other Supreme Court justice that we lost, and that was Jane Roush. And that had to do with political mischief and not an untimely death. Now, say what you might want to say about Justice Antonin Scalia. There's no doubt that this is a man of energizing personality, engaging personality, and towering intellect. Antonin Scalia was the first Italian-American appointed to the Supreme Court. And wouldn't surprise you, of course, that he did teach at the University of Virginia Law School. I think that's where he learned how to make his mark. And he did make his mark, to be sure. Certainly not decisions that I always agreed with, but I think we have to acknowledge that fact. And his passing now leaves a vacancy. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, the Constitution says that the President shall nominate when a vacancy occurs. Antonin Scalia was nominated by Ronald Reagan in 1986. He was unanimously confirmed. Boy, did we do things differently back in 1986. It took a month, about a month, from the day he was nominated by President Reagan to the day he was confirmed. A month, 30 days. We now have about 340 days left until President Obama leaves office and we get a new president. And yet, within minutes of this great jurist passing, Republicans in the Senate were tweeting, "You want to give odds of the possibility of President Obama getting his nominee approved to the Supreme Court? How about 0 and none?" And we even have confirmation from the gentleman from Lexington. 0 and none. 340 days. No way they would approve a nominee. Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Senate, says, let the public have its way and we'll elect a new president. I can imagine Antonin Scalia thinking about this. The true literalist, the person who looked at the plain meaning of the words of the Constitution. Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2. Quote, the president shall nominate. Not, quote, the next president shall nominate. Not the future president shall nominate. Not the president you want to nominate. Not the president I want to nominate. The president. That's what the Constitution says. And yet Mitch McConnell is out there saying, no way, Jose. We're not going to approve anybody. We don't even care who it is. We don't care how qualified the person is. We don't care how many times that person has been approved by the Senate to other circuit courts or appellate courts. We don't care. What we care about is power. Pure, unadulterated power. That's what it is all about. And that is what has been going on in Washington with the politicization of judicial selections for years. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, the same thing is now happening in Virginia. In Virginia, we talk a lot about the Virginia way. But if you were to ask people who are watching what's happening with Justice Jane Roush, they would say we've lost our way. Here we have an eminently qualified jurist who's been sitting on the court for 7 months, essentially being fired for no reason. And remember what our Constitution says. Our Constitution says that when we're not in session, the governor shall appoint. That's what the Constitution says. Appreciate that clarification. And it's just because a couple of people got upset because they weren't called at the appropriate time that they decided they were going to fire this qualified judge. Historically, we have always recognized gubernatorial recess appointments. I think there have been about 31 consecutive interim appointments over the course of many, many years, and yet this one is not good enough. Recently, at least the House Courts of Justice Committee, 22 members unanimously qualified Justice Roush to be qualified to serve on the Supreme Court. But what do we hear on the other side? In the other body? Crickets. Nothing. And so now her appointment has lapsed. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, we will never have Antonin Scalia back. But we can get Jane Roush back. I encourage us to do so sooner rather than later. And in conclusion, I hope it be the pleasure of the House that when we adjourn today, we adjourn in the honor and memory of Justice Antonin Scalia.
The gentleman from Charlottesville, Mr. Toscano, moves that when the House adjourn today, it adjourn in the honor and the memory of Justice Scalia. As many as favor that motion will please rise. That motion is agreed.